Yeah, I think pretty much the biggest thing when it comes to like a lot of those orgs and the way they're. I mean, I think actually, you know what's interesting? It's interesting you say that you don't think 100 Thieves is kind of as competitive focused, because I actually think they're one of the few orgs that probably actually does make that a focus. Whether or not they've actually managed to perform that well in the last year, I think that 100 Thieves' weakest point really is actually their content. I think their branding is really strong, but I actually think their content is probably their weakest point.
Yeah, I know you feel strongly about this.
Yeah, I
I
just
think
like.
it's been improving, but you do look at their channel and it's like they fluctuate from 20k views a video to like 500k views a video.
Yeah, well, you know what's really interesting, and I guess actually, wow, we'll finish this topic because I've got the next one I really am interested in talking about like mainly Team Power and like and also 100 Thieves, but it was based off something Andy said. But yeah, but do you have anything else on the, like, you know, kind of what you think their strategy is before I divert us onto the next topic?
Please divert us, please.
Okay. So what I just found super interesting is a comment that Andy made, which I think is yeah, interesting, which is building, because I would say in terms of esports orgs that are run like companies versus ones that are run, you know, like the whole creator vibe, I would say Energy is probably one of the best examples of that. In terms of, like, I think
For
they.
those that didn't listen, last week, the Andy Elliott's referring to is Andy Miller, who we interviewed on Watchtime last week. It was a brilliant episode. So many interesting stories. Definitely go and listen to it if you haven't already.
Yeah, such a good episode. But I remember he made a comment which was it's like the biggest thing that he sees as an issue if he looks at an org like 100 Thieves is how tight it is to kind of like one individual creator or like one person behind it.
Yes.
And I think you can see that in 100 Thieves content, where when people think 100 Thieves, they're like, oh, Nadeshot's org, right? Like that, like it's his thing, which is a problem because it means that you know, like if Nadeshot ever gets bored of it or he steps away from it, or even if there's an aspect of the org that doesn't involve him heavily, then it means it's not going to succeed as well. And I think that you can really see that in 100 Thieves content. When you look at their content, if it's like, it really is the Nadeshot show. When you're looking at, or you know, Nadeshot and Courage, when you're looking at, when you're looking at like the content they do, what performs well, what doesn't perform well, it is like the difference between if it's a piece of content that involves Nadeshot versus if it doesn't, it is night and day. Because people aren't, I don't think, as invested in the overall team. And that was actually my only real like thing that I was like, I questioned a bit when Lockie started Team Power, was that obviously his name is Lachlan Power, Team Power. It's like the team name is literally his name, which I wonder. Which you know what? And he's very lucky. It wouldn't be like if I called my team Team Watkins, because that's really specific. Like, he's lucky. He's got a pretty dope ass. Yeah, he's got a pretty like dope ass.
Sick name. It's a sick name.
Yeah, it's a sick last name. You know, like, so he is lucky in the sense that I think it's not like it couldn't exist without him in a branding sense. But I am interested to see if he's able to really kind of build the brand out in a way that, you know, kind of doesn't
it's not just Lachlan's team.
Yeah, that it's not like Lachlan and these are the friends that I brought along to, you know, play video games with. Like, whether or not if he's gonna, because I think right now that like their content is obviously doing super well, but it's almost like how, you know, if Lockie were to start like a second channel, you know, that would go well. And I'm not trying to like diminish away from what they've done, because I think they've actually done a really, really good job with it. But but I'm saying that I don't know whether you can immediately be like, okay, so now the org is, as it exists, like a big success, or whether
I think it goes back to that point around why are creators actually starting orgs in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, why did Lachlan want to start Power? Why did Nadeshot want to start 100 Thieves? Why are these Fortnite guys not just taking a nice salary and actually trying to build a name for themselves that's not their own personal name? And I think for me, it's 100% a smart move. It's not an easy move, but it's definitely smart if you can pull it off, because for me, it's around the fact that creators have a lifespan, and that's a really harsh reality to say, but it's true. It's
not
like,
me. I'll be doing YouTube till I die.
No, but like at the end of the day, it's a career. And while it's a great career, it's a career that's 100% based on you. Like no one else can come and make videos for the Muselk channel. Like you can't ever delegate that responsibility. You can delegate the editing, you can delegate whoever's making your thumbnail, but you can't delegate the fact that every day it has to be you behind the camera. And while that's great, and that's obviously half the point, it also poses a question that a lot of these creators, when they get into it, are like 18, 19 years old, and they'll do it maybe for 5, 8, 10 years, but at some point there'll come a time where the content they're not making or the game they're playing kind of loses relevancy, and people, that fluctuation in views and therefore income will go up and down. And therefore, I think what a lot of people are trying to do by creating these brands or creating these orgs is creating something that actually isn't 100% reliant on them and that will stand the test of time and is a project that they can invest in and use some of, you know, their audience to then leverage into something that is hopefully, and best case scenario, bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, like, you know, Lachlan's done a great job. It's where I think like Nade's obviously done a great job, although he's, you know, clearly taken on a lot of VC funding, which means he probably doesn't own like a majority of 100 Thieves anymore. But yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like, why are they starting it? And they're starting it because they probably want to build something that isn't 100% reliant on them, but it's hard. And like, I think you still think of FaZe and think of FaZe Banks. You still think of 100 Thieves and think of like Courage and Nadeshot. Like, I think it's very, very difficult to draw that distinction. So the people that can do it,
it's almost like the biggest strength. The biggest strength of most orgs is their creators. But ultimately, that's actually also kind of a weakness because... because ultimately, it's like, do they become too reliant on those creators? Like, do those creators become too integral? I was also
How do they create assets that are like not just based on the creators that are in the content?
Yeah, I was going to say, though, I think the other reason that you see a lot more creators kind of like doing stuff at the moment is that, and like a lot more of these like YouTuber orgs starting up, is that I think back in the day, you know, I think this is especially the case with like the 1% House, for example, right? Because I think back in the day, you know, most pro players, like, goes back to that point we were talking about before about like YouTubers now being personalities. And that a lot of these guys now, you know, like actually just have like vast amounts of disposable income, you know, like org contracts can be great. You can get like 200, 300 grand a year if you're a decent player, like on an org contract, like that's really, really cool. But ultimately, like a lot of these guys are big YouTubers in their own right. And they're probably making like 300, 400 grand a month if they're, you know, a decent sized channel. And it means that they're no longer as like financially reliant on the stability of an org contract to keep doing what they love. They're like, I can keep playing games regardless. Like I'm printing money doing YouTube and the occasional sponsored video. I don't need that contract to pursue my dream of playing games. So like I'd much rather like take a bit of a risk, take a bit of a chance, and like go out on a limb and like try and do my own thing. And I do actually And I actually also do think that's a large part of it. You know, like I think For me with Click, you know, like obviously while it's like, you're right, it's like good knowing that YouTube has a half-life and building something that will, you know, outlast your YouTube career. But also I think there's just an element of like finding something you're passionate about and wanting to, you know, kind of actually just run that project. And half the enjoyment is just watching that project, you know, do its thing.